I'd like to call to order the Health and Human Services and Aging Committee, January 22nd, 2020. Can I have a roll call, please?
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Here. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. We have a quorum.
All right. Anyone signed in, Madam Clerk, for public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one is signed in.
All right. Approval of the minutes from the January 8th, 2020 meeting. I believe all of us were here.
Move approval.
Moved and approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have 3 items referred to us today. Madam Clerk, if you could read the first one into record, please.
Resolution number 2020-0019, authorizing an agreement with Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office in the amount not to exceed $4,078,260 for legal services for the period January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Oh, there we go.
I heard it.
Good afternoon, Christine Alexander, Department of Health and Human Services. On behalf of the Division of Children and Family Services, we are seeking to enter into an agreement with the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, who serves the needs of DCFS by providing representation and counsel whenever needed in child abuse, neglect, and dependency matters. The Children and Family Services Unit of the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office is charged with providing supportive legal services to the county's child welfare agency, whose statutory duty it is to protect the most vulnerable Cuyahoga County citizens, its children. The Prosecutor's Office recognizes that prosecuting child welfare cases is both sensitive and highly specialized work. It requires highly trained staff. The Assistant Prosecuting Attorneys, or APAs, receive specialized training in the areas of child welfare law and practice and the related complex legal issues that arise in these cases. The County Prosecutor's Office works on both court-involved and non-court-involved cases, and attorneys are present with DCFS staff in every case that is filed, in all stages of a child's protective proceedings. They prepare workers for testimony when necessary, and they prepare cases for litigation. The attorneys also provide on-call representation 24/7 after hours and in emergencies. Additionally, the Children and Family Services Unit also works to advance child protection, child welfare law, and practice by participating on statewide committees that review and draft initiatives and laws and regulations that impact child welfare in Cuyahoga County. Prior to 2019, the attorney caseload was approximately 108, more than double that of nearby metro counties such as Lorain. In order to effectively serve DCFS children, additional staff have been hired for 2020. There's also been a significant upward trend since 2016 in annual DCFS child custody cases, nearly double during this time to 2,000 children annually. The 2020 budget includes 1 new managing APA, 3 new APAs, and 1 new legal secretary. This agreement constitutes 33% Title IV-E dollars and 67% levy dollars. And I do have here with me today from the County Prosecutor's Office, Michelle Myers and Jim Ginley, if you have any additional questions.
All right, you answered some of mine. I do have one more. You didn't touch on the contract. It stated was 22 days past due, and it stated the reason being was because of the negotiations for this contract. Who does the negotiations for this contract?
Michelle, do you want to come forward?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Michelle Myers. I'm with the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. I am the supervisor of the Children and Family Services Unit. So there's a group of people who do the negotiating. It is me, people from our civil division, my superiors, obviously Mike O'Malley, Lisa Williamson, and we work closely with the law department attorneys to make sure that the contract is in place.
Okay, thank you. Open it up to questions to my colleagues. All right. Hearing none.
I'll ask a question.
Councilman,
My question is how the amount that we're budgeting here compares with what it was in 2019.
Do you have that? I have that. The agreement represents an increase from 2019 from $2,700,448 to $4,078,260.
Could you repeat that? I didn't
Sorry.
quite get
The
that.
2019 agreement budget was $2,748,203.
So it's going up from 2.7 million to 4 million?
That's correct.
And why is that?
Hi, my name is Jim Ginley from the County Prosecutor's Office. What it is it's an attempt at matching the budgeted allocation for the Prosecutor's Office for this expense to the actual contract amount so that we can exploit and receive all reimbursement that's applicable. If the amount is less than the appropriated balance, then we spend the appropriated balance. We have ceilinged out. So now we are trying to match that, and that's been a goal that we've actually accomplished this year.
So in 2019, was our expenditure 2.7 million or?
No, the contract was that our expenditure was higher than that. And then part of the increase in 2020 is attributed to parity increases and compression increases that we had received from county council that are now factored into the budget.
In addition
So-
to new staff.
The new staff.
As well.
So how much was the actual expenditure for 2019?
I don't have that on me. I'd have to look at it. I can send it to you, Councilman Miller.
That's fine, sorry.
Oh, that's yours, okay.
And what's the percentage reimbursement on this?
Pardon?
Is it 33%?
33% Title $40. I'm sorry, 33% Title $40.
Okay.
This is the first time that I think that I remember hearing about us actually getting up to the contract amount. Has that always been because you said we finally.
Well, I
reached
say
it
this is the
year.
first time it's actually matched, so that we had the tentative approved dollar amount, assuming it was going to be approved, and we shared that with all the players, and then it was negotiated that amount so that we could exploit every dollar we could have for the potential reimbursement.
Okay, but not net, and so you went for 4 million, but the cost is actually less than that, right?
It could be if our monthly billings don't hit the actual expenditures. They probably will, though. Okay. But I can, like I said, I'll send council the 2019 actual expenditures from the prosecutor's office.
So how does that work a little bit? As I know it has HHS levy funds as well. So you bill us.
Right, we bill according to a formula every month. Our fiscal officer does that in our office, working with Children and Family, and we submit it, and then we get a revenue receipt for the cash, and then we deposit it. We get a check, for the cash. We deposit it via revenue receipt into the general fund.
Okay.
We don't receive revenue into the prosecutor's office for these expenses.
Okay. What about the Title E funds? How does that?
That's the Children and Family Services Unit. who
We're
submits
doing
that.
it for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. All right. I know you need the second reading suspension because I see that it's behind already. Is that the request?
Yes, Councilwoman.
And why did negotiations take a while?
My sense is finding the adequate dollars to fund this contract, this agreement, I'm sorry.
Okay. On our side?
Yeah, it was back and forth. It was a big adjustment. It was a long overdue adjustment is the sense I have. There were requests in 2018 to not only bring some parity to the salaries, but also because we couldn't reduce the caseloads, is to add staff so that we can be comparable with other metro counties.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to move R2020-0019 to the full council under second reading suspension. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if you could read the next item into the record.
I'd like the record to reflect that there was a change due to a typographical error to this resolution. It was made to change the time period from 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020. We're changing it to 1/1/2020 to December 31st, 2021. So I'll read the correct one into the record. Resolution number 2020-0020, authorizing an agreement with Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities in the amount not to exceed $1,400,000 for individual options waiver eligibility verification services for reimbursement of Medicaid home and community-based services for the period 1/1/2020 to December 31st, 2021.
Good afternoon, Christine Alexander again, Department of Health and Human Services. On behalf of the Division of Children and Family Services, we are seeking to enter into a new 2-year agreement with Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, or the DD Board, to provide services to disabled youth that are in the custody of DCFS who are in receipt of Medicaid individual option waivers. Broadly speaking, home and community-based services provides opportunities for Medicaid beneficiaries to receive services in their own home or community rather than in institutions or other isolated settings whenever possible. These programs serve a variety of targeted populations, such as people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, individuals with physical disabilities, and/or with mental illness. DCFS works collaboratively with the DD Board to provide room and board, home supports, and community-based services to Medicaid-eligible disabled youth between the ages of 17 and 21 years. The DD Board develops individual service plans and redetermines eligibility for waiver services annually. Youth often reside in foster care, or they may reside in a group home or intermediate care facility. The DCFS social worker and DD Board support administrator work closely together to develop long-term plans for these youth for housing and community-based services based on their individual level of need. This is done prior to these youth aging out of the foster care system. Depending on the level of need, youth who graduate high school may go on to live independently in their own apartments, in a group home setting with other residents, or in an intermediate care facility. Many of them are employed, but many receive transportation services, homemaker, and/or personal care services in their home. Last year, 22 special needs youth in the custody of DCFS successfully graduated from high school with the help of these services. During the past 2 years, DCFS has seen an increase in the level of need for care in the youth they are serving, resulting in a slight increase in the 2-year budget for this agreement. This is a 2-year agreement and is funded 100% with Medicaid individual option waiver dollars. Here with me today is Ebony Freeman from the Department of Children and Family Services and John Parkowski from the DD Board, if you have any questions.
So my one question was why was it the increase since 2018? But you just explained that. In terms of the foster care and group home setting, are these individuals also can be in their parents' home as well?
No, they're all in the custody of Children and Family Services. So more often than not, and these are higher functioning individuals, are in foster home situations.
And does this contract include the other services that you talked about?
Correct, yes.
Transportation, okay. All right, any other questions from Councilwoman Brown?
You indicated this was, thank you, Madam Chair. You indicated this was a new agreement. Is this a result of the change from the Board of Developmental Disabilities providing these services and the state?
No, that's a great question. There have been many changes at the state level. We've actually had this agreement of this nature since 2014. They are all 2-year contracts, and we write new agreements to make sure that the language in the contract is up to date and reflects the services that are being delivered.
And so this is funded with a waiver, I see. So is that state or federal? How does
That's
the waiver?
federal Medicaid dollars. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Miller? Did you have questions?
I do. The question I have is whether this is a contract where we're providing services to the Board of Developmental Disabilities under contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
My question is whether the services that we provide are limited to providing eligibility verification, or whether we provide additional services to this population for the compensation that we receive.
I'm going to have Mr. Parkowski help answer that question.
Good afternoon, councilpersons. John Parkowski, Cuyahoga County Board of DD. There is not eligibility verification per se according to this contract, but we do that. Our case managers, our support administrators do that on a regular basis for this population of individuals. They have to renew Medicaid eligibility annually, and eligibility has certain milestones when eligibility must be redetermined.
So, what services does the county provide to the Board of Developmental Disabilities in exchange for the $1,400,000 that we're going to receive?
It's actually a partnership so that the CCBDD is able to enroll these individuals on a waiver. We're responsible for the matching cost of that waiver, which would save the DCFS agency the 60% of the costs. If we weren't involved, because these individuals are in DCFS custody, DCFS would pay all of those costs. Because we're able to enroll them on a waiver, we will eventually have to serve these individuals in the future when they age out of DCFS. We're sort of getting a head start on that, putting services in place, putting a living arrangement in place, enrolling the person on the waiver, and it saves the 60% by drawing down the federal funding. So this cost that we're billing back is what it cost the CCBDD and is a resulting savings to DCFS.
So whatever costs that you have that aren't covered by the federal reimbursement get billed back to the county.
Correct.
Under this contract.
Correct. That's the room and board piece and the waiver match, the 40% waiver match that CCBDD pays. We bill it back to DCFS.
So the county's not receiving money, we're paying money.
It's a reimbursement.
It's a
process?
we're paying the money and the county's paying us back.
Okay. So.
At 40% of what it would cost typically if the county paid it directly themselves.
I don't think the description describes this very well at all. I mean, this money is not for eligibility verification services. You know, you read this, it makes you think that we're being provided money to provide eligibility verification services, and that's not what's happening at all.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's correct. So I'm hoping to clarify. DCFS pays 40% of the cost while the youth is still in their care. So as opposed to paying 100% of the cost through this Medicaid reimbursement process. I don't know if that's more simple. I mean, the services themselves are home-based community services, room and board, transportation, in-home supports, so that individuals can live independently. Those are the services that are being provided. It's through a reimbursement process, though, that DCFS is only paying 40% of the care, of the cost of these children that are in their custody.
Based on your explanation, I'm getting an understanding of what's happening here. But what I'm saying is that the description should
Doesn't
be
read that way.
should be better written. So, I mean, you can't read this and get any kind of an understanding of what's actually happening here, because what the description says is totally something else.
Okay, that's my apologies for that. Which document are you reading?
I'm
Referencing?
reading
what she read, the clerk read into record.
I'm reading the summary that's in the agenda.
Okay,
The
okay.
summary that's in the agenda reads as follows. A resolution authorizing an agreement with the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities in the amount not to exceed $1,400,000 for individual options waiver eligibility verification services.
I agree. It doesn't read well.
Yeah, so,
I think the agreement itself is more detailed. I can provide that to you. I think it reads better than providing eligibility services.
Do we have excuse me, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Do we have a program summary somewhere? Yeah, it's in the, should be in the back of the book, the scope of the work summary. But we're just trying to figure out, because the legislation's actually
the
asking
same
for one
language,
thing.
the same language is in the legislation in the whereas clause.
Right. So I did increase that, and I don't know. So is this similar to what was written last year in terms of,
It would have been the year before last.
The year
Yes, the last 2-year agreement.
and this is the same?
Yes, it's a similar reimbursement process.
But I mean, was the verbiage the same?
I don't know. I can look that up.
Okay. And if you could provide this committee with a description of actually what you're asking for, what you stated today.
Of course.
Uh,
I don't know, do we want
What
to
I would,
change?
what I would like is that for you to prepare a revision to the first whereas clause for next Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my intention is that, I mean, this has already started. We should get this out of here. We should pass it and recommend second reading suspension. But I'd like you to bring us a revision
Clarification of the language.
to the first whereas clause that we could pass as an amendment next Tuesday, so that it better describes what it actually does.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair?
Councilwoman?
I mean, the whereas clause does say the primary goal of this project is to provide appropriate housing and services for children with developmental disabilities. And clause B says transition youth into adult development disability system, which is what I heard Ms. Alexander say. So while the resolution description includes the eligibility verification services, I think that's where the confusion is,
Yes.
but it does not neglect to point out the other services that you described. So I just wanted to point that out. The one thing that I am confused about with this legislation, and maybe this is a concern of my colleague Councilman Miller as well, is that you've identified this as a 60% reimbursement, but it's in the legislation as 100%, which I know sometimes those can be a little bit technical in nature, but if you can just clarify that for us.
Well, the provider who provides the services is paid the 100% of the Medicaid rate. The reimbursement is from DCFS to CCBDD is the 60%, the federal share, or the 40%, I'm sorry, because it's a complicated arrangement. The local CCBDD is responsible for 40% of those 100% Medicaid costs. So we have to send, I know it's complicated, we have to pay a share locally that draws down to 60% federal money. So
Why do you use the phrase 100%?
because
The dollars are all Medicare.
because the
Stevens, can you-
provider is actually
Provider's
paid
getting-
100%. They get payment directly from Medicaid.
And this partnership was established since 2014.
Correct.
So what I'm getting is that DCFS wants to place children in our care into foster homes or group homes or other kind of settings. But if we did that without CCBDD, then we would have to pay 100%.
Correct. That's correct.
So we formed this kind of partnership with you. So because you have something with the federal government that you can match their 60% with your 40, we get the 40% rate.
That's correct.
But the
Yes.
providers that we
Providers
pay.
pay the full rate, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. That's not here, but.
Ms. Stevens.
Do one more time.
Hi, I'm Ebony Freeman. I'm the program administrator of our multi-system kids unit at Children's Services. And I just want to clarify, this is not for every child that goes through eligibility. We only pay 40% match when we have a child that is in our custody and that has not graduated from high school yet and is living in a DD setting. So when we have this age population, it's hard for us when they reach the age of 18 and they have these disabilities and these behaviors. It's very hard for us to manage them in traditional foster homes, therapeutic foster homes, and sometimes residential settings. So sometimes we have to transition this process prior to them graduating because at that time we have exhausted all options as far as placement. So we only pay 40% for just those particularly high risk need kids who have not yet graduated, but they are living in a DD setting.
Who are we paying that 40% to?
Well, we're reimbursing DD.
Okay.
So,
40%.
yes, so we're reimbursing them the 40%. And then once that youth graduates, then DD is totally responsible for their living arrangements and financial needs on that end. We just maintain custody as guardians until 21.
The legislation kind of reads, to Councilman Miller's point, that we're getting reimbursed this money. So yeah, this needs to be, I guess, overhauled before Tuesday. We'll pass it out today, second reading suspension. But the description versus what's in the legislation versus what is in the headlines of the agenda today are kind of mixed and confusing. Any other questions?
I would recommend a complete rewrite. Please don't use this as your guide.
Excuse me, Ms. Stevens, can you speak into the microphone, please?
I would recommend a complete rewrite. Please do not use this as your guide. This was, for those of us who try to do our homework in advance and read this online, I didn't have a clue that it was what you just described verbally.
Fair enough.
Well, I think I've seen this language before, individual options waiver eligibility verification services, but it's not in what you were describing. That's why I said I wonder if something got mixed up. I've seen that verbiage before. So any further questions in regards, and you guys know what we're requesting a rewrite prior to Tuesday. And I guess you will work with Ashley on that to make sure that gets done. Second reading suspension. Okay. I'll make a motion to move R2020-0020 to the full council under second reading suspension with the caveat that it will be a revision of the legislation, not the legislation, but the description. Is there a second?
Second.
I moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine, you could probably work with Levine as well if you needed to work directly with someone in HHS, Ashley and Levine.
Oh, I didn't put my name up there.
Madam Clerk, if you could read the last item into the record, please.
Resolution number 2020-0027, authorizing an amendment to a master contract which includes number CE 1700245 through CE 1700265 with various providers for various services for the Cuyahoga Options for Independent Living Services Program for the period January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to December 31st, 2020, and for additional funds in the total amount not to exceed $3,600,291.
Good afternoon. Paul Porter, Health and Human Services, on behalf of the Division of Senior and Adult Services. This amendment is for an extension of time and additional dollars to fund the Options for Independent Living Services program for calendar year 2020. Funded services under the Options program include chore services, emergency response, grab bar installation, homemaker and personal care services, home delivered meals, and transportation. The current master agreement started January 1st of 2018 after an RFP was issued for these services in 2017, and a new competitive procurement process will take place in the next couple of months for services to start January 1 of 2021. The current master agreement has 19 vendors that serve people throughout Cuyahoga County, including one vendor that provides chore and grab bar installation, one vendor for emergency response services, 11 vendors for homemaking services, 3 vendors for home delivered meal services, 7 vendors for personal care services, some of which also provide homemaking services at the same time, and 3 vendors for transportation. The value of the amendment for 2020 is $3,600,291, and that's divided as follows between the different services. Chore services, $21,500. Grab bar installation, $4,266. Emergency response services, $136,966.15. Home delivered meals, $1,429,360.49. Homemaker, $1,499,722.16. Personal care services, $99,865.45. And transportation services, $383,560.75. All of those services have experienced an uptick in demand between 2018 and 2020, as well as an increase in demand just since September of 2019, the last time the options contract was before this committee for an amendment. And this increased funding that was approved in the biennial budget will enable DSAS to meet that increased demand. Increased demand between January 2018 and this month has been as follows: a 35% increase in demand for home delivered meals, a 27% increase in demand for homemaking, a 15% increase for emergency response services, 24% for transportation. Personal care, which was a service that was added back for this master agreement that had been provided several years ago, has gone up 232%, but that was because we started out with a fairly small number of clients since the service was being reintroduced. Just looking from September to January, we've seen a 16% increase in homemaking demand, a 24% increase in personal care, 11% for home delivered meals, 6% for emergency response, and then 11% for transportation. So demand continues to increase for these services. Right now, the current caseload sits at 1,283 clients across the county. During the month of December, there were 122 new assignments made, but just in the first 2 weeks of January, there were 100 new clients. So looking at going from 122 clients in a full month to 100 clients in just a 2-week period, we do anticipate that demand will increase for this. And looking at the timing of this amendment, we had been processing the paperwork with the anticipated value of $2.8 million, which was the base budget amount for 2019 for this contract. Fortunately, the funding was increased for options during the biennial budget process. So we had to take some time to look at how we were going to allocate those additional dollars among the several services I mentioned. That was the reason for a little bit of a delay with getting this before council.
And Mr. Porter, just on that statement alone, you also have the flexibility within your office if the need should increase in transportation services, so to speak, they can move the funds around to match what that need might be.
Precisely, Councilwoman Conwell. That's why we did this as a master agreement. In the past, we had separate agreements for each service. So you might have had 7 vendors for homemaking that were all under one agreement, but those dollars could only be used for homemaking for that. So if we see, as I mentioned, the demand for each of those services increased by varied amounts. So if we see that dollars that are allocated for homemaking might be better used for home delivered meals that had a higher increase in service, we have that flexibility without having to bring back an amendment. As I indicated, it is our goal in the next couple of months to release either an RFP or an RFQ for this so that we bring back a new master agreement sometime in the fall for services to start next January. And I do have Darlene Wade, Deputy Administrator at the Division of Senior and Adult Services, here with me today if you have any program-specific questions.
I'm going to ask one about the funding, just to make sure that I'm clear.
Sure.
There's an additional funds, the additional funds, I know it totals 3.6, but the additional funds would actually go to the 2.8 figure, right?
Correct. So it was 2.8 million and then 800,000 was added to that. So that's where we arrived at the 3.6 million. And again, once those additional dollars were added, we did have several meetings to determine how to initially allocate those dollars among the different providers, with the understanding that we have the flexibility to change that based on the demand we see throughout the year.
And then my other question would be about the grab bar service. You said you put 4,000 in that pot. That doesn't seem like it's utilized a lot, or we're not marketing it.
Sure. So grab bar services are a little unique. I'd like to bring Darlene up for that one, but it's not usually looked at as a standalone service. Okay. So grab bars are installed for people that get other services and happen to need grab bars. Also, it's a very low cost in comparison to some of the other ongoing services where we might have to pay for 3 hours of homemaking a week or 5 meals per week for a client. So that cost adds up. The grab bar installation is a one-time fixed cost. We have it in the contract where we pay for the labor to install the grab bar and then the cost of the grab bar depending on the different sizes we have. Mm-hmm. That's why it ends up being a lower amount. We could increase that though if demand rises. What would you say, Darlene?
Good afternoon. My name is Darlene Wade. I'm the Deputy Administrator at Division of Senior Adult Services over our clinical programs, which is our home care, skilled services, and our options program. You said something that I think was important. We talked about marketing. What has happened in the options program is when we had limited funding, then we had limited referrals. And when the community finds out we have additional funding, then we get our referrals are increased. And I think with the grab bars and the marketing, as we talked about, then the referrals will be increased once the community really knows that we're available to do that with funding. And I think that's one of the issues that we've dealt with, particularly with the grab bars.
So in the past, we have marketed the programs, because I kind of thought that maybe when a senior needed some homemaking services, then that aide is in there, and then that aide kind of looks around and sees, determines from the services that we provide what that need is, and that we didn't really market out to the senior centers or stuff like that, that we have these things available for them.
That's one way of doing it, but we've also marketed. And the reason why we hadn't marketed as much recently is because of the funding, which we are now looking at marketing. We've increased it just a little bit, and you heard Paul talk about, with just a couple of times we've spoken to the community and marketed our services just briefly, and we're already exploding with referrals.
Because the grab bar, just the amount just seemed kind of low if we weren't, because if we were marketing, even though some seniors don't need these other services, it does help them last longer in their homes in terms of getting around and things like that, right. Especially in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the most falls. Yeah. So, okay. Any questions from my colleagues in regards to what was stated?
Yes.
Councilwoman Brown and then Miller.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Have there been any changes in the providers, or have these are the same 19 that we've always?
Councilwoman, these are the same providers that we've had since the last amendment took place. There were two vendors at the start of the contract that are no longer with us. They were removed based on the last amendment that we did, and that was at the provider's choice. One of them was Benjamin Rose Home Care, and they discontinued their home care program. The other one was the Visiting Nurses Association that only provided personal care. They determined that the client volume for that service wasn't enough to meet the cost of them participating in the program. They did not indicate that they might not consider coming back in the future, but I think it was just low client volume that they saw, in part because they only had that one service. As I mentioned, a lot of our personal care providers also provide homemaking services. So having a client that you can do 5 hours of service per week for, if you do 2 hours of homemaking and 3 hours of personal care, is much more lucrative for the provider than just going out for 2 hours of personal care.
Okay, and then you mentioned the current client base, did I get this number right, is 1,283?
Yes.
And does that include the 122 and the 100 new individuals that Mr. Porter mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that number last year, do we know? In 2019, how many clients?
We had 1,044, I believe, January 2019.
January 2019. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Porter. Is the 2,800,000 that you referred to before, is that the amount that we spent on this program in 2019?
Councilman Miller, we're still waiting on the final invoices for the month of December to be processed, but I think we anticipated that it was going to end up being right around that amount. And we saw those invoice amounts creeping up month after month, probably starting in the second half of 2019. So we're on trend to where the January invoice for this year, which will be processed sometime next month, should be close to that $300,000 mark that would meet the $3.6 million that's in this authorization.
Okay, and other than that, Ms. Brown covered the questions that I had in mind. Thank you.
Okay. All right. One last question for me. You broke down the different individuals and what services they covered. For the grab bar services, I thought you just mentioned one person. Is that a sole source, or is that the only people that we have? And I don't know which specific one is the grab bar services that.
Sure. So you mean the vendors for each
vendor,
different service?
yeah.
So the vendor that does the grab bars also does chore as well. And chore would be if somebody's preparing for a move, for instance, it's maybe a bit more work than what we would expect a homemaker to do, or like a major spring cleaning where you're doing things like cleaning a refrigerator and an oven, cleaning drapes, things like that. And that's ABC International Services, so they're the vendor that does those two services.
Okay. But the only one that vendor that does the grab bar.
It's ABC, yeah.
Okay. And they have their own contractors that come in?
Correct. They have contractors that come in and do that installation. And as I mentioned, most of the other services, we have like an hourly rate, so we pay per hour for homemaking. For personal care, we pay per meal for home delivered meals. For grab bars, we pay the cost of the materials, and that varies whether it's an 18-inch, a 24-inch, or 36-inch grab bar. And then we pay for the labor as well. So it's kind of two separate rates for that service, where the only other service that's like that is the medical transportation, where we pay a flat rate for any trip up to 10 miles one way. And then if it's a longer trip, there's a mileage rate that's tacked on for each mile after 10 on a one-way trip.
And how many grab bars did you install last year?
I can double check that figure. Based on the current cost, it's probably somewhere around 40 clients, I would say. But I don't have,
Yeah, we can get you that information if you,
yeah.
we don't have exactly.
And so, Ms.
No.
Wade, how do you plan on, you stated you agreed with my assessment of the lack of marketing. How do you think that will proceed in the future?
Well, right now, we're in collaboration with our Office on Aging, and we're working on putting together a marketing strategy.
Okay.
We're in discussion regarding it.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I would weigh in on that is at the Cuyahoga County Senior Services Network meeting that was held last Thursday, where senior center directors and staff members come together to share ideas about senior services. It was mentioned that the budget for options was being increased, and several senior center directors kind of perked up about that and said, well, we've got people we can send your way in that case. So I think there is interest in the community, even just based on a brief remark at that meeting.
Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you share again just the qualifications to be a recipient? We know obviously age 60 and up, and there's an income or asset requirement. What is that dollar amount or line of when someone becomes eligible
The
or not
dollar
eligible?
amount is, I'm sorry, Councilman Jones. The dollar amount varies depending on what your income is. We go by the federal poverty guidelines. I do believe that you can only, in income can only be like $3,100. That's a ballpark figure. That's not exactly, but it's about $3,100. Your assets a month, and your assets can be $35,000 per person. And then we also look at your ADLs and your IADLs, meaning that you have the motivation within your body and a certain motivation within your ADLs and IDLs. So we do look at that, and that's how we determine eligibility.
And your home counts as an asset or does not?
One home and one car.
You're allowed to have and still
You're
be
allowed to have
eligible.
one car and one house.
Thank you.
ADLs and IDLs, I don't.
That's your activity of daily livings and your instrumental activity of daily livings. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
Councilman Brown. And it depends on whether you can drive, what's going on with you as far as making your way around the house. For example, if you have arthritis and you're having a hard time reaching into the cabinet, so those are like your ADLs and IDLs, your activity of daily living or your instrumental. So we do look at that, and when our social workers go into the home, they do a complete assessment. So they look at that, and they look at the income and the things we talked about as far as one house, one car, and the federal poverty guideline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Second reading suspension is what you need?
Yes, please, based on the January 1 start date. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to move this piece of legislation, R2020-0027, to the full council on second reading suspension.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.